Welcome to the Time for Heroes podcast. On the podcast this time out, I've got Keith Dion. He is a guitarist, producer and author. He's worked with Noel of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and along with that, he's dealing with Noel and Mitch Mitchell's legal estates and the hearing to do with the money for streaming and stuff like that. I don't know as much about it as Keith does, so as we get into it, I'm sure he'll enlighten us. But there is a court case ongoing with an expected verdict on the 16th of February. So, yeah, he's going to tell us about all that. But before that, we go right back to the start, Keith. So, what was life like for a young Keith Dion growing up?
All right. Hey, Martin, first off, thanks for having me on the program. It's a pleasure to meet you. I know you've got lots of music lovers out here. So let me start from the beginning. I'm an American, but I grew up in New Zealand, of all places. My father was a major in the United States Marine Corps. He was in World War II. He was in Korea. He did 2 tours in Vietnam while we were living on naval bases in Southern California at the height of the Vietnam War. It was a crazy time, as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
growing up on these military bases. This ugly war was going down. So when my father finished 2 tours of duty in Vietnam, he came back, he retired from the Marine Corps. And of all places, we moved to New Zealand, of all places, in like the early 1970s. And it's like, my own thoughts on that are that I think my father wanted to get away from the Vietnam War protests, but little did he know, he should have known this, that New Zealand and Australia also had soldiers in Vietnam, so there was a lot of protests there going on about that ugly war. Long story short, I got there still, about 13 years old. I ended up going to high school and school in New Zealand. That's where I became a touring musician or a professional musician. And in New Zealand, there was 2 major breweries. One was Dominion Brewery and another was Lion Brewery. So my first 3 or 4 years as a professional musician was touring around the New Zealand brewery circuits. And it's just, that could be a whole book in itself. So to make a long story short, after doing that for several years, I moved back to California, 1985, and trying to make a short story out of all this, I was able to get the first alternative New Zealand groups released in North America. My own group, we were called the Ponsonby DCs. Ponsonby is the inner city neighborhood of Auckland, New Zealand. It's sort of like the Haight-Ashbury of Auckland, New Zealand. So my band was called the Ponsonby DCs. 1985, I landed and I had all the master tapes that we'd recorded. We just thought they were demos, but I immediately got several offers to release these recordings by my virtually unknown New Zealand group, the Ponsonby DCs. Next thing you know, it's a big hit. Next thing you know, there's headlines in all the New Zealand press about this. We were the first New Zealand alternative band to be released in North America, and we hit. And this is like big news at the time. So in order to further the promotion of the record, I ended up going back to New Zealand to like end of 85, beginning of 86. And next thing you know, I've compiled 2 compilations of the 22 best New Zealand bands, including many of your listeners probably know about the Flying Nun New Zealand label that had some really interesting alternative rock bands. So I come back to North America with these 2 New Zealand compilations. Next thing you know, those are big hits. And we've launched, for all intents and purposes, the New Zealand invasion of North America with my band, the Ponsonby DCs, hitting. Next thing you know, I've got a cocaine habit. I've got all these hit records. We're talking about 1985, so those are the bad old days.
Yeah.
This top San Francisco band called the Ophelias, and then we got signed to Rough Trade Records. who I'm sure that you've heard about.
Yes,
And
I mean,
well,
major.
major. And so I put out 2 albums in the Ophelias through Rough Trade Records. And just again, trying to make a long story short, within 18 months of me showing up from New Zealand in San Francisco, I've got 5 hit records, all National College Radio top 10.
Hmm.
And guess what happened, Martin? All the money got ripped off.
That's
All
a
the
music business for you, innit?
Tell me about it. I'm talking about the mid to late 80s.
Mm.
This is like at the dawning of the CD and DVD releases taking over from vinyl, but there wasn't even streaming in those days. So in order to set up an independent record company, you as the record company, you've got to pay for the vinyl to be released. Then you put it out through hundreds of radio stations. Lucky for us, all the records were hits. We got tons of radio play, National College Radio top 10 across North America. But back in those days, you relied on the honesty of these record distributors who would like put your records out all over the place. And next thing you know, all the records are hits, all the money gets ripped off. None of the record distributors paid. And me and my partner are left holding the damn baby. And that's how it works. And so that was my foray or start in the music business and the recording business. It's like, sure, you've heard of Sam Phillips, the guy that ran Sun Records that
Hmm.
he discovered Elvis Presley. Exactly the same thing happened to him. I'm writing a book about this whole journey from New Zealand, landing in San Francisco, and releasing all of these New Zealand records that were hits. But again, Sam Phillips had discovered Elvis Presley. He's got a tiny independent record station, or excuse me, record company. Next thing you know, Elvis Presley sold 2 million records, and guess what happened to Sam Phillips? None of the record distributors wanted to pay him back, so his company's going down the tubes because he had the misfortune of discovering Elvis Presley and
Hmm.
having a hit record. And exactly the same thing happened to me and my partners with all the New Zealand albums that we released in 1985, 86. That resulted in Sam Phillips having to sell Elvis Presley's contract to RCA for like $45,000. And he had to do that because he had a roster that included like let's see, Johnny Cash, Jerry Lee Lewis, Roy Orbison, Carl Perkins, Muddy Waters. He had all these great artists, and his record company's going down the tubes because he's had to pay for 2 million Elvis Presley singles, and the record distributors aren't paying him back. So he's left holding the baby. So that book that I'm talking about, that's another book that's finished. I got 2 Jimi Hendrix books that are finished, but I actually first had finished my New Zealand orientated music book. It's called Last Tango in Ponsonby: The Golden Era of Kiwi Rock and the Launching of the New Zealand Invasion of North America. So that book's going to come out after my Jimi Hendrix books. But that's about that. You asked me about my childhood and how we got there. That's sort of my beginning in the music business,
So,
and becoming successful can sometimes be the worst thing that can happen to you.
yeah.
Having a hit. All right.
So having that experience then, obviously we're getting ripped off. When did you come across Noel Redding, and how did that first contact come?
Good question. I'm sorry for my lengthy answer on my first, but I had to like set the stage how this goes up. Well, look, I'm 10 years old in the late 60s. My father's in Vietnam. I go and visit my friend Roy Contis. And he had an older brother, Sweetie, who had seen Jimi Hendrix play at the Anaheim Convention Center in 1968. He shows me this record. The first time I saw a picture of Jimi Hendrix, I said to myself, I want to be that guy. I don't know what that guy does. I want to be that guy. So when I was 10 years old, saw my first picture of Jimi Hendrix, I decided to become a professional musician. Fast forward 25 years, and I'm touring America in Noel Redding's band. I'd met him originally in 1997. I think in Glasgow, they have British Heritage blue plaques, right, on buildings
Yeah.
for yeah, for famous people. Hey, September 1997, the British Heritage Society uh, got a blue plaque on the house where Jimi Hendrix lived with his girlfriend Kathy. I'd met Kathy years before, so she invited me over for this outrageously successful blue plaque ceremony led by Pete Townsend. And that was the first blue plaque in British heritage history honoring a pop or a rock musician as well as a black person. So that was a huge deal back in 97. And that's when I first met Noel Redding. And I hit it off with him really well. Him, me, and Kathy, we just hit it off so well. I said to Noel at the time, look, I'm a professional musician. I got a really good band in San Francisco called 305 AM. If you want to come to the West Coast, I can book you high profile concerts with good guarantees. We'll do some recording. And he was all for it. The next thing you know, in the next couple of years after 97, 2001, I was working with Noel and we did 3 American tours, West Coast tours. I recorded and filmed everything. And I ended up producing a really amazing live album called West Cork Tuning, because Noel lived in West Cork in Ireland at the time. So here we go. Let's backtrack a bit. I'm 10 years old. I see my first picture of Jimi Hendrix. I want to be a professional musician. 25 years, I'm touring with Noel Redding after meeting him at the Blue Plaque. And here we are, 20 years later, I've formed a company that owns or incorporates Mitch Mitchell's estate and Noel Redding's estate. In our work, in going through all of the legal case files and correspondence and documents that Noel kept, he had a really massive archive of legal documents. That allowed me to form a company with several individuals, 2 or 3 individuals, but we incorporated Mitch Mitchell's legal heirs and Noel Redding's legal heirs into our company. We found not only the legal documents that proved that the Jimi Hendrix Experience was not only an English partnership, but that it had never been legally dissolved. So
Right.
here we are, 50 years later, the Jimi Hendrix Experience partnership isn't some old defunct band from the 60s. It's still a legal partnership. So we found effectively the paperwork that proved the original band split was 50% of the proceeds to Jimmy and 25% each to Noel and Mitch. So having found this documentation, we then incorporated our English partners who then helped us launch this massive back royalty lawsuit against Sony Music. Took us 4 years to get to the trial date, but on December 10th of 2025, the trial started. It lasted 2 weeks. I was there. I gave a witness statement, so I was one of the star witnesses of the trial. The trial is now over. People think, oh, this is going to take 10 years. It took us 4 years to get to the trial, but the trial is over and the verdict is coming back on February 16th. We are holding our breath and crossing our fingers, and it's looking like a very good prospect for the good guys here.
Well,
This,
I'm glad to hear it.
oh yeah, oh yeah. Like, let me tell you, the lawsuit included not only copyright infringement, but the recognition of Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding's performers' rights, as
Mhm.
well as their rights to receive income from digital streaming. Because here's the rub. Back in the early 70s or the late 60s, when Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding signed these partnership agreements with Jimi Hendrix and their management of Chaz Chandler and Mike Humphrey, there was nothing called performers' rights. There was no streaming downloading. This is how, you know, this is how the case sort of went. It went from how can you possibly sign away your rights to things in 1973 that didn't exist.
Yeah, we didn't even have CDs or nothing, let
Yeah.
alone streaming platforms.
Yeah. Or performance rights. Performance rights is a royalty chain for musicians who play on famous recordings. And that law only went into effect in 1988. So, of course, the contracts regarding the original Jimi Hendrix Experience partnership, there was no wording in there about performers' rights or digital streaming. What does that mean? In 1967, when they signed the partnership agreement, there wasn't any of that. And so the industry, we knew this case was going to be big because, obviously encompasses the copyrights of one of the most iconic record, you know, contracts or of all time, the most iconic record collection, copyrights of the Jimi Hendrix Experience. We knew it was going to be big, but what's really seems to be unfolding now is the fact that this case, we win, and again, we're cautiously optimistic. Once we win this case, every legacy musician from the 60s and 70s
Yeah.
that paid for their performers' rights or their digital streaming rights, they're going to come out of the woodwork and they're going to have to be knocking on the doors of the major record companies. And it looks like the gravy train's going to be over for these guys because none of the people that were in successful bands in the 60s or 70s, for the most part, have been paid for their work via streaming or performance rights. So this is going to be a landmark case that
So,
apparently upends the music industry.
so who's to blame then? Obviously, this money's owed somewhere. So who is it that's to blame? Is it the streaming companies or the record labels?
You know what? It's a gray area. You can guarantee that the major record companies have sweetheart deals with the streaming platforms. And what I mean by sweetheart deals is that they probably get the highest royalty rate, and they're also the guys that get paid first. You wouldn't believe the royalty checks as a singer-songwriter and a record producer that I get from BMI. I get royalty checks every quarter of about $37.22,
Hmm.
you know? And with Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding, they both died in relative poverty while their catalog sold over 100 million records and they get nothing.
Yeah.
It all has to do with how, but after Jimi Hendrix died, first off, he died without a will, and that put everything into chaos. With Mitchell and Redding being owed millions of dollars at that point, but with Jimmy dead and without a will, it completely descended into a conflict and chaos. Excuse me. So Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding then instigated lawsuits against Warner Brothers and other record companies, as well as their manager, Michael Jeffrey. And so in 1973, you couldn't make this stuff up. Mike Jeffrey is en route to give a deposition in the lawsuit that Noel Redding has filed against him. He gets killed in an airplane crash over France, and he disappears, and all the contracts disappear. So the star witness with the paperwork that proves that Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding were in a partnership with Jimi Hendrix and were due 25% each of all the proceeds, he dies, all the contracts go with him. There's these huge conspiracy theories surrounding Jimi Hendrix, and the number one is that their manager, Michael Jeffrey, faked his own death,
Yeah.
ripped off all the money, and made off. You couldn't make this stuff up. Mark.
Living somewhere in the Amazon rainforest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's sitting there. He's ripped off all the money. He's really the animals as well. So apparently, he disappears in this tragic plane accident. He disappears. They never identify his body. So there's all these rumors that he like faked his own death and ripped off all the money. And it just It was total chaos, but it was a perfect storm that had hit Mitchell and Redding. You know, they're in a partnership with Jimi Hendrix. He dies without a will. The estate attorneys and the record company start circling the wagons. They realize that Mitchell and Redding, they are their biggest nightmares. They have their name on paperwork and contracts that show that they own 50% of the Hendrix copyrights. So the estate attorneys and the record companies all put a fire to ease these guys up and deny them their rights. And it progressed from there. And the two of them eventually died in near poverty while their catalog sold 100 million copies and they get nothing.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense, man. So, like, as I said, like, asking the question, who's to blame, record companies or streaming platforms? The reason I was asking that, so, like, if this ruling comes to pass, if you win the case, and as you say, it opens the door for other legacy acts to kind of make their claims. How do you think that'll affect the music industry going forward? Like I'm talking about maybe for up and coming bands coming up, because if the record companies need to make massive payouts, it's probably going to affect the ones at the bottom. There's going to be no deals for them either.
Here, you really hit on a really good point there. New bands, let's say, Martin, you're a great singer-songwriter, you live in Glasgow, you got a killer band, you get a record deal. Guess what? This is the digital age. The record deal that you sign or any new band is gonna sign, it's gonna include performers' rights, and it's gonna include digital streaming rights. I mean, now you are, and you probably heard that the number one platform for sharing music these days is digital streaming. It's
Mhm.
not CDs, it's not vinyl, it's not DVD, it's digital streaming. So if you're in a modern band and you get signed by a record company, of course they're going to address that. But to further your point, where this is going to impact the major record companies is not the new band, but all the old bands whose catalogs are being exploited by the major record companies because when they signed their contracts and made their records in the 70s or the 60s or the 80s, the contracts they signed didn't include performers' rights or digital streaming. The impact this is going to have on these major record companies, they're going to have to renegotiate every single contract with every single artist that isn't getting paid. It's their biggest nightmare.
Yeah.
How else could they rectify? Everybody's going to, for one thing, again, we've got our fingers crossed for holding it. We're quietly confident that we're going to get a good result from the verdict.
Keith, just
Yeah,
see when you're talking, see when you turn. Are you facing the computer just now?
yeah.
So see when you turn round the other way, you keep losing your voice.
Okay.
So I don't know if you're.
All right. So I should stay here like this. Is that good?
Yeah, but yeah, if you can,
Stay here.
holding you at
All right.
gunpoint.
All right. Good. So again, we're holding our breath and crossing our fingers for a positive outcome in the verdict. And once we succeed, the first thing that's going to happen is that Sony is going to have to renegotiate the Jimi Hendrix catalog contract to include the Mitch Mitchell and the Noel Redding estates. That's the first thing that's going to happen. What's really amazing about this case is that we're leading the charge for all other legacy artists, but we're using one of the most iconic catalogs of all time.
Yeah,
And that's why they can't brush this under the carpet. They can't buy us off with quick chump change. If they could, they would have done that before. But the Jimi Hendrix catalog, just to enlighten all of your listeners, the key catalog of 5 or 6 albums that those guys made, they've never gone out of print, and they're never going to go out of print. 50 years from now, Martin, any 12-year-old kid that picks up an electric guitar is gonna buy those records. They can't the major record companies cannot ignore this catalog, and as far as, setting a precedent for all other legacy artists, that's the main thing that we have going for us, is how iconic and still what a massive seller the Jimi Hendrix Experience catalog is.
Has there been any other artists contact you in regards to this?
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to mention anything specific, but yeah, I was just interested in. Obviously,
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
will be interested in what's going on here because as you say, it's going to have a seismic change in the music industry as we know it. I mean, like looking back on the Jimi Hendrix Experience, I mean, it's a whirlwind kind of 3 years or something in it. Really, I was looking back, familiarising myself with
Yeah.
it, and so much happened in that period, and
Yeah.
they had so much backing. I think like an early gig in London, they had everybody was there: Clapton, Lennon, McCartney,
Yeah.
the Stones, Pete Townsend. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like Jimmy certainly found his home in Britain.
Big time.
And I mean, the thing that kind of rankles with me for that was no number one albums in Britain. Um, Obviously, the kept off number one with the first album, be Sergeant Pepper's, which is understandable. But even still, like see when you look at the music climate now, an
Yeah.
album can go to number one 30 years later or whatever. Is
Yeah.
it couldn't do that then? So like, if you win this ruling, is there a chance that maybe the publicity that you get for this, is there a chance that we could see Jimi Hendrix Experience album at number one?
Let me tell you, Martin, that's a great question. I'm gonna segue. I told you that when we formed our company encompassing the Mitch Mitchell and the Noel Redding estates, and we found the paperwork mainly in Noel's legal files, that proved the case and showed that the partnership was still valid and still alive. But listen to this. You're talking about promoting new records, and you're going to get an exclusive here because I haven't said this yet. I don't think I've said this on any interview yet, but we found the location in March 1970, 6 months before Jimmy died, recorded a solo album in New York called Nervous Breakdown. Okay. And Jimi Hendrix is on 3 tracks. And so we were able to locate those tapes. And part of our settlement moving ahead is for the release of Noel's Nervous Breakdown album. So we
Right.
ended up locating the multi track tapes in New York. We had them restored and then converted to the digital format. So I've produced a double album of Noel's Nervous Breakdown from 1970. It's got Jimi Hendrix on 3 tracks. And just from the publicity and the promotion and the push that we're going to get from the legal case, we're going to use all of that to promote Noel's Nervous Breakdown album, as well as the 2 books that I'm writing on this. But to further your point, there's so much attention coming now to this case, and it's going to just extrapolate once the verdict comes down and we get a positive verdict on February 16th. This is just going to go through the roof, and it could actually push the original catalog into being rediscovered by all new listeners and old listeners alike. Because
Mhm.
you know how, like, you know, as an example, somebody like Freddie Mercury dies immediately when some famous guy dies. Boom, like when David Bowie died. Boom, all
Yeah.
of his records go boom, right to the top, and that either through streaming or through vinyl or CD. So that's once we get a positive verdict back on this case, it is quite likely that the Hendrix catalog will continue to go through the roof. And again, I want to stress This is a robust, iconic catalog that has never gone out of print, and it's never gonna go out of print. Just the key 5 or 6 records, so there's gonna be a reason, there's gonna be a reckoning of the Jimi Hendrix catalog and how the public sees that, definitely
Mm.
after the verdict is read.
That I mean, there's always been the market for these bands. Obviously, like, for instance, you get into Primark and you get T-shirts, like, I
Yeah,
don't know if you're aware of Primark, but see, like, the T-shirts, it's always Bob Marley, Jimi Hendrix, stuff like
yeah,
that. So,
yeah.
like, where does that money go to then? Like, where
You
do
know
the
what?
rights say Jimi Hendrix image on a T-shirt? Where does all that go?
Alright, I really d and that is gonna make it personal, that Jimi Hendrix's estate is run by one individual, and it's run up in Seattle, Washington. It's called Experience Hendrix, LLC.
Mhm.
Right now, and since since Jimmy died, his estate has been handled by various entities that, for one thing, don't share the revenue with Mitch Mitchell or Noel Redding or Buddy Miles or Billy Cox, who are the other musicians that Jimmy played with. So right now, Experience Hendrix has an exclusive right to sell anything to do with Jimi Hendrix. That's name and likeness for T-shirts, coffee
Mhm.
mugs, calendars, posters, records, vinyl, CDs, DVDs, you name it. So right now, they've got an exclusive on that. But as you know, all over the world, there's people out there printing Jimi Hendrix or Bob Marley T-shirts that don't have the legal right to do it, and they're doing it,
Yeah.
and as far as Bob Marley's estate or Jimi Hendrix's estate or even the Beatles, for God's sake, people go out there and they sell pirated T-shirts, and sometimes they get tracked down and caught, and then they have to cease and desist. So, but to answer your question right now, and this is what's being challenged in court, is the exclusive arrangement that the estate of Jimi Hendrix has with Sony Music.
Right. Yeah, it's mega interesting because, as you say, it is seismic what's gonna happen here.
Yeah.
I've got my fingers crossed for it. Um, if like, I think the music industry as a whole could do with a kick up the arse, and that's could be it.
Yeah, that's what everybody's saying, Martin, that this is what's gonna happen, like, a kick up the ass. And Sony, I don't know if you read some of the earlier press releases from the actual trial, when the 10-day trial happened in London, December 8th through the 18th, and again, I was there.
Mhm.
A statement saying that if the claimants, Mitchell and Redding, if we succeed, it's gonna destroy the music business as we know it, and it's gonna sow chaos and disorder throughout the world's industry. Well, good. That sounds like a pretty good thing to me
Yeah.
because all of the musicians that I know, and let's face it, I've been a professional musician for 45 years. A lot of my friends are musicians. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's getting ripped off. Nobody gets paid. These mega multinational corporations, they make all the money. People like me, I'm not sure if you're a musician, but I bet if you are, you're not making a living wage.
Well, I'm not making any money for this podcast anyway, so
So yeah, so that's what's gonna happen. This is gonna be a seismic shift. And again, the demarcation line as far as who's gonna come knocking on the door of all the major record companies with their hand out are the legacy musicians whose recorded work was put out before 1988 performers' rights or
mhm.
before like 2001 digital streaming royalties. That's gonna everybody that had recorded or had hit records before those 2 key dates, they're gonna be knocking on the door with their hand out, and this is like the major record companies big time. And, hey, these guys have been making all the money and creaming off all the everything off the top. at least since 2001. Let's just call it 25 years. And, too bad for them if the courts, rule in our favor and they
Mhm.
have to rewrite every major record contract they have. Too bad for them. They've had a free ride for 25 years. That's business. That's the way the cookie crumbles, as they say, right, Martin?
Yeah. And so then, say this does fall in your favour, how quickly do you think um, things will start to change?
Well, I can't really talk about the entire industry, but we've discussed that this case is going to make a seismic change if we prevail at court. And specifically to our case, the verdict is coming down on February 16th. There is going to be, if once we prevail, again, fingers crossed, there's going to be another hearing where the judge will determine what the damages and the settlement and the costs and the interest and everything else that's going to go to the Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding estate. So that's going to be a hearing at a further date. I can't see that hearing date being 3 years from now or something. It's going to be like, let's face it, the case has been going on for 4 years. The trial is over. The verdict is coming back on the 16th.
Mhm.
Once we prevail, fingers crossed, I can't imagine the hearing to determine the settlement and the damages being that far out. So I can only speak for our company and for the Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding estates. But again, you've used this word, I've used this word, seismic shift. And once that positive verdict is released, it's gonna soak. I'll quote Sony's attorneys. It's gonna sow chaos throughout the industry, and they're going to have a lot of disgruntled and unpaid legacy artists wanting to start conversations.
Yeah, and rightfully so.
Ah, and I'll leave it at that. You know, there's so many people that this is going to affect, and it's chickens coming home to roost, ripped off chickens coming home to roost.
I'll be waiting with bated breath for this verdict. It's a really interesting story, and
Totally.
it it could as you say, it could blow the music industry wide apart. It's gonna be really intriguing to see what happens.
And
It's
again, Martin, I want to stress the main push behind this being such a seismic case is because it's Jimi Hendrix. Everybody in the world knows who Jimi Hendrix is. It's an iconic catalog. This isn't, not to belittle people or other bands. Like, let's just say, the Guess Who, American Woman. They had some big hits in the 60s. They sold a bunch of, millions of records. But the new generations of music listeners, they're not buying Guess Who records. If we
mhm.
were representing the Guess Who, it wouldn't have the same impact or potential seismic shift impact on the industry as something as iconic as the Jimi Hendrix catalog. Because let's face it, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan, maybe Queen, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, Jimi Hendrix. Those are like the enduring catalogs, aren't they? Those are the
Well, I
catalogs.
mean, I'm looking like more modern times. So, what was the dates you were talking about? 2001. What was like? I'm looking at like Nirvana, like Kurt Cobain as well.
Yeah.
Somebody
Yes.
like that. You think how enduring his legacy is, and they've
And
cut off dates that they really missed there.
oh, you know what? You've really hit the nail on the head. As far as I'm concerned, maybe Oasis is that too. Oasis, they, they're still alive. If
Hmm.
anybody's ripping them off, they're going to go after whoever that is. But the Kurt Cobain and the Nirvana catalog, that is just as iconic. That's definitely a rarity where it's more of a modern band that is in that iconic catalog where they routinely will sell, or, 10 million units a year. But with Nirvana, look at this situation. That was a trio, right? We had Kurt Cobain as the main guy, and he tragically died. But I tell you what, um, the Chris Novelic and Dave Grohl, the other members of Nirvana, they didn't get ripped off.
Mm,
Courtney Love as Kurt Cobain's spouse, who owns his legacy, she didn't do an end around and rip off the other two members of Nirvana. They're still getting their royalties. Yeah, that's them and Queen are obviously huge bands who's have this enduring legacy and they're continuing to get paid. It won't so much affect them because they haven't been ripped off to the
mm.
extent that running were. So
Well, as I say, it is an intriguing conversation. As I say, can't wait to the 16th of February to see what comes, and fingers
yeah,
crossed it goes in your favour. Um,
absolutely.
been an absolute pleasure speaking to you and finding
Yeah.
out about all this. Obviously, the last part of the podcast, it's called Time for Heroes, as you can see here. I asked my guests to pick four heroes to come for dinner. It can be musical, it can be sports, whoever you like. It can be people you've met, people that you would love to meet. They can be alive or dead or whatever you want. So, four heroes to come for a fictional dinner. And what would you cook for them as well? Just to just to see how good a cook you are.
What would I cook? Let's see. I have a really amazing recipe. Here in California, Mexican food is really up there, and there's some great Mexican restaurants. So I've sort of borrowed this recipe. It's for cheese and potato grilled tacos.
Right.
Really, really amazing with handmade salsa. So, yeah.
Something like that. I'm pretty sure I had a guest on not that long ago, like a British guy, and he's out somewhere in California, and he picked something similar along the lines.
Yeah.
He's from Manchester, and he was in a band around about the same time as the Roses.
Oh, yeah.
They've just released their debut album, 35. They lost all the master tapes, and the record label dropped them, and they've just been able to release it 35 years down the line.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
they sound just as good as the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays.
Excellent.
But yeah, that's what I'm pretty sure it was some sort of Mexican type thing that he
Yeah.
picked as well.
Let me tell you, apart from Mexico, the best places you can get Mexican food are in California. Because I don't know if you know this, but California used to be part of Mexico,
Hmm.
and there's a very large Latino population. But you go to a place like New York or London, forget it. You can't find good Mexican, not even in New York. Like New York, you can find lots of great Italian and other dishes, Chinese, Asian. You can't really find good Mexican food in New York or London, but definitely California is the place for that.
Yeah, that sounds nice anyway. So for this meal then, who are you bringing? Who are you inviting?
I'm going to invite my singing partner. I didn't get a chance to talk about my band here in San Francisco. We're called
That's
the
your
Great,
current band.
yeah,
Well, I've got it written down, the Great American Ro
Robber
Rubber
Barons.
Band.
Look, listen to this, Martin. Who would be better suited to take on the record industry and bring them down with a seismic change than the leader of the great American robber barons?
Yeah.
And so, look, my band, the Great American Robber Barons, I formed it. I wrote this great song called "At the Hands of the Robber Barons," and it's a microcosm of the music industry. But my we have an amazing female vocalist, Diana Mangano, and she
Mhm.
was in Jefferson Starship. She replaced Grace Slick in Jefferson Starship for 12 years. All right. So I'd bring her definitely to the dinner, but we also have an amazing drummer. You may have heard of him. His name's Prairie Prince. He was a
Mhm.
founding member of the Tubes, and he's been touring with Todd Rundgren for over 40 years. He's like one of the world's top 10 drummers. So if I'd bring anybody, it would be my loyalty to those two because they're heavyweight musicians and they're dear and loving friends.
I'll post links actually as well for that because you get stuff on Spotify and I've seen some
Yeah.
stuff on SoundCloud as well. So I'll post links to the band. Um, I had a wee
You want
listen briefly today and it sounded good.
good, good, good. No, we cover all sorts of genres. I write mainly on the acoustic guitar, but then it's formatted in like a full band. So it's like a alternative rock, folk rock thing, but we also do jazz and other genres as well. We don't limit ourselves to one genre. So let me know if you want me to send you some more links.
Yeah, and what was that? Were you doing gigs in your house or something? I've seen some videos on Facebook.
There was what?
It was it. Were you doing like a wee mini festival in your house or something not that long ago?
Yeah. If you ever come to San Francisco, every 6 weeks we're hosting singer-songwriter house concerts. Because again, being a musician here, living here in San Francisco for the last 40 years, a lot of my friends are musicians and singer-songwriters. So we've been hosting like really really great singer-songwriter showcases where we'll have 3 or 4 different singer-songwriters I know with, like, a minimum backing, like maybe a trio, like a violin or a bass or a saxophone or something, so the next one of those is February 1st, so if you're in the neighborhood, drop by.
Yeah, I'll see what I can do if you pay the flights for me or something.
I'll tell you what, Martin, as you can imagine, we get a great verdict on the trial that we're hoping for. I'm gonna be in the UK to do more PR and promo and live interviews, and we're also planning listening events for the release of Nervous Breakdown, Noel's unheard solo album, so we'll
Mhm.
definitely have to have you involved or an invitation at the very least to
Oh
the
yeah,
event.
definitely. I would love that, and I've got somebody that would love to come to that with me as well.
Definitely, definitely, because let me tell you, getting back to Nervous Breakdown, Noel's unreleased solo album, it was found in the bowels deep in the bowels of Jimi Hendrix's New York recording studio, which is called Electric Lady, and the new owners of Electric Lady, they were the people that found the tapes and sent them back to us. So once we get the record released, there's gonna be a record release or listening party at Electric Lady Studios in New York, and you can imagine who's gonna be at that,
Mhm.
you know?
That sounds amazing.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, I'm quite happy to come to the one in New York if you.
I'll pay you right. Now, yeah, we'll definitely we're gonna have I don't know if you know this, in London, there's the Hendrix Handel Museum. You've heard of
Mhm.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, and that's actually the location. I speaking earlier about the blue plaque, British Heritage blue plaque for Jimmy
Mhm.
was at 25 Brook Street. Right next door, there was another blue plaque for George Handel, the classical composer. What they did, they combined the 2 locations into the Handel Hendrix Museum, and we're planning on doing a victory celebration or a listening party at the Hendrix Handel Museum, so we'll definitely get you an invite to that at the very least.
Yeah. That sounds amazing.
Alright.
Um, yeah, so that's 2 heroes you've got. Another 2 to go, just to round it up.
Yeah. Who else?
Who else are you gonna pick?
To invite?
Yeah,
Alright, Patti Smith.
right.
Patti Smith, she's
Mhm.
obviously everybody's a you don't have to say people like Jimi Hendrix. Who doesn't like Jimi Hendrix? So I would say Patti Smith and let's say Paul McCartney and Pete Townsend.
Brilliant.
Pete Pete Townsend was actually the guy that pulled the string that unveiled the blue plaque for Jimmy at Brook Street. So we'd have
Mhm.
to invite him, definitely. Patti
Yeah.
Smith and Pete Townsend. How about that?
Yeah. Listen, fantastic bunch of heroes. I'm pretty sure, I don't think Pete Townsend's ever been picked. I've done, like, close to 150 of these episodes. Obviously, McCartney and John Lennon, they're up there. David Bowie's picked quite a bit.
Yeah.
But no very no very often we get a Pete Townsend, and actually pretty rare that we get Jimi Hendrix or anything like that, which is astonishing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I wasn't sure if you meant dead people or people that are still alive. So I would say Mitch Mitchell and Noel Reddick. And
Well, I kind of thought that was a given anyway, so you can have them as well.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
They
aye,
would.
it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. As I say, I'll post the links. I'll post the links that I've been sent
Good.
for other people to have a read through the court case and stuff like that. But
Perfect.
all the best for 16th of February, which is only what, a matter of 3 weeks or something.
Yeah. It's 3 weeks out. It's going to come here sooner. But again, Martin, thanks for your hospitality. Thanks for having me on. If you have any follow-up questions or if you want any more links or anything, just shoot me an email. We'll take it from there. But you're
Yeah,
definitely going to get invited to the events that we've got planned in the next, months.
absolutely brilliant, man.
All right.
I look forward to that. But I thank you. Absolute pleasure coming on today, Keith.
All right. Thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, mate.
Thanks again for listening to the podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, please contact me on the email timeforheroespod@gmail.com, or you can get me on Instagram at timeforheroespodcast. Thanks very much. We'll be back soon with another episode.